I'm Nara Dahlbacka. I work in policy, managing partner at the Milo Group, which is a very, very small local LGBTQ plus progressive firm. We've been doing drug policy stuff since we started in 2010, and I took over that side of things in 2016 when I came on. For the last 5 years now, I was working on various iterations of the state bill. I'm not working on the current one, which is a research pilot program. We'll see if that one makes it through, but turned my efforts when the state looked like every bill that came through was going to be worse and worse and worse, that it was time to do some work on the local level, like our friend Larry here. So that's a little bit of background. Studied theater and came into politics, born into politics in Oakland, and have been acting locally since I was a little kid, cartwheeling, precinct walking. So I'm gonna have these amazing luminaries here introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about them and their work. And then we'll start our conversation here and hope that we get some more folks trickling in, because this is an important conversation and we have a lot of really important work to do to make sure that the right voices are uplifted and are not criminalized. Let's start at the end here.
Hi, I'm Aikutzi Valadez, Angelica Valadez in Spanish. Aikutzi is my Wirrárica name. It means womb of the goddess, holder of the sacred waters. And it's like a gourd which we hold the water that blesses people. But Aikutzi also goes in all the directions, in the 5 directions. And when I was born into a family that built a nonprofit called the Huichol Center for Cultural Survival and Traditional Arts, which I'm a board member of. And I was born into indigenous life, activism, protection. My mom's a cultural anthropologist, Nobel Peace nominated with for her research with peyote and the Wirrárica tribe in 2019. And being part of that organization and being indigenous, we started joining to support Decriminalize Nature in 2019, and I'm serving on the board since 2019. I think that my life's work has brought me here, and you kind of like go into what you're doing, and the plants, the protection of the plants. I think that there's a lot of confusion about the plants and the unity within people, and this all has brought me here because I think we should all have access to plants in the respectful, right way, and be reciprocal to the indigenous peoples. So if we do that the right way and we unite with respect, I'm here talking to you, and hopefully I can gain your respect so you can support us back, not just here, but also globally with indigenous peoples. So now I'm gonna pass it to Larry.
Thank you, Aikutzi.
Okay.
Reggie, do you wanna, I see you there.
Are we supposed to be here?
Yeah,
Okay, all right.
This is good. Welcome, guys. So this panel really is a panel of folks who have been moving the ball forward. I'm sure that they've all given a little bit about their background, but we gathered them here just because I've sat down and talked to each and every one of them, and they have really a mind-blowing understanding of policy both locally and nationally. And with a crowd this size, if you guys don't mind, I know that you have your talk set up, but if you guys are cool with it, I encourage asking questions. Like a crowd this size, we have time, we can do it. That's all. That's my piece.
Okay, so, okay,
Yeah,
yeah,
we're
thank
just
you.
doing the intros.
Are you gonna,
Yeah.
I'm gonna sit for a little
All right, yeah, that's great,
Awesome.
okay.
Yay.
Awesome, well, thank you all for being here as well. As Nara said, this is an important conversation. Aikutzi started off with some great conversation around sort of the long history of use all across the planet with the indigenous people that have been engaging with these sacred plant medicines. My name is Larry. I am the co-founder of Decriminalize Nature, and been working on that since about 2019. Before that, I was working a lot with how do you help people, support people, bring education to them before an experience, or give them integration or meaning making after their experience? I did my dissertation research looking at ayahuasca-based archetypes of transformation, and how do you help people with meaning making? So that was a big part of what I was doing, and I came across all the folks in Oakland in 2018, 2019, and we started having a conversation around, how do we build this conscious community center? And the conversation came up around, policy that was looking going forward in Denver, some ballot initiative work that was going in Oregon, and we said, hey, we can do this here. We have the right amount of people here. So Carlos, who was a board chair at the time, had some connections to Oakland City Council. We did some education, and we made some things happen, and it was pretty impressive. We were bringing everyone together, as Aikutzi was saying, under this sort of unified field of plant medicine, sacred medicines, and really being able to educate the community. Both, obviously we have a special, space here in the Bay Area where we were told in Colorado by the folks that were doing the Denver initiative, you can only do mushrooms. We pulled it. That's all we can do, right? And we're like, we're in the Bay Area. There's ayahuasca communities here. There's cactus communities here. There's ibogaine communities here. There's EMT communities here. Why are we just going to stop at mushrooms? Let's see what we can do. So we started to have this conversation around nature and what's our relationship with nature. And I think that was really important and critical for the movement in general, because it takes you out of the box where people can say, oh, you guys are just trying to get high. We're really trying to say, hey, why is our relationship with nature criminalized? What's going on here? So a big part of our work, now I think I'll speak to this in a little bit, but now about 29 cities across the U.S. that have passed in 6 years with a pandemic in the middle, which is pretty impressive. It's really about this new conversation we're trying to have. It's not a clinical model, it's not a medical model, it's about how can we have our own grow, gather, gift approaches, how can we make sure that everyone has access and they're not paying $3,000 like it costs in Oregon or what have you, but that people are actually able to engage with this and share with each other. So I'm really excited to be here, really excited to have some conversation with everybody, and thank you all. Yeah.
Thank you for your work. It's such a pleasure to be on this panel. Thank you so much, and thank you for the invitation. I'm Mason Wilson-Tanev. I have been a midwife in this community for about 27 years, and so I come from a political background. Midwifery is inherently very political, oppositional. It's also existed for millennia, so I'm not new to this activist space. But at the end of my career, I realized that we had very few resources to help women treat their postpartum depression and anxiety, and that psychedelics offered a way forward for people, and it was not something I could offer them, and it wasn't something I knew very much about, and so I set out to know more about it. I'm now a student at CIIS, working on my doctoral dissertation, began very curious about how to use psychedelics, as I say, for postpartum depression and anxiety, and that has really transfigured into how do we prefigure a world where we can act as if we are free. So what comes next? What comes after prohibition? What do providers do? How can underground providers account for transparency and accountability themselves while still promoting right relationship with the medicine, while still promoting indigenous knowledge, while still being in communication and responsibility to each other? And that's the meat of what I study and I'm interested in now. There are other societies, there are other communities. Humans have always self-governed. So how can we self-govern moving forward in, as you say, in a good way? And that is a really critical conversation that the providers of medicine need to have with each other and with the people who are making policy. Because, of course, one of the arguments against ending prohibition is, well, we have all these unsafe practitioners. And so if the logic then is to professionalize, well, if we professionalize psychedelic care providers, are we actually increasing access, or are we limiting access in a completely different way? And midwives have something to say about that. Midwives have been through that professionalization of an ancient tradition process, and there are a lot of parallels there. So I come to this from a curiosity as a practitioner, as a provider of both midwifery services and of psychedelic care, and I have a lot to say about how we professionalize and the potential pitfalls and promises of it.
Okay. One of the things that we've seen recently, and sort of unfortunately, is looking at the Oregon model, right? We all had a lot of, I think, hope looking at what was going on in Oregon as the first statewide model of what it might look like to mainstream psychedelics. And what wound up happening there was a rollout that wound up looking like it made decriminalization a bad word. And I'm wondering, I know Larry, you and I are kind of working on this right now, but what do you all see as, how do we move forward, right, in a post-Oregon world where suddenly the most, grassroots providers, right, of care in Oregon have found that they can't afford to be open, they can't navigate the process, and the people who need help the most are not able to afford the $1,500 or $15,000 it is to get to access above ground treatment. So I just would like to know your thoughts on Oregon, since that seems to be the conversation right now. And if you want to throw some Colorado in there, then we could do that too.
Can I share that to be an Oregon licensed provider, it costs $2,000 a year to maintain your license, and that the training to get that license is somewhere between $15,000 and $20,000, and you can only practice in a licensed service center, and those service centers are $10,000 a year to maintain. That's just the fee that goes to the state. Now, what you get for that is that Oregon providers of psychedelic care have their own board. So they're not under a medical board or a board of nurses like other providers. So they do have other psychedelic providers who manage them. So that's the benefit. But I ask you, $2,000 a year for a grassroots provider, $10,000 a year to maintain the actual physical site. Is that accessible? Is that revolutionary? Huh?
Yeah, and I think I might just add to that, sort of the history of the Oregon bills, right? And the history was, it started off, Oregon was going to do a legalization and a decriminalization of mushrooms as one bill. A particular person donated a lot of money, split those off into two bills, and they did an all-substance decrim, and then they did a legalization framework only for mushrooms. Unfortunately, the all-substance decrim was repealed 2 years ago, last year, and now they have a new criminal penalty, which is called drug enforcement misdemeanor, which basically re-incentivizes enforcement for all different substances. What ended up happening, even from the get-go, I would say that if they had done this and at least allowed these two other things, maybe things would have shifted a little bit. It's still, with the two bills in Oregon, 109 is the psilocybin legalization, 110 is the decriminalization, that one was repealed. But even when both of them were there, it was only for use and possession. It's still a felony to grow a mushroom. It's still a felony to pick a mushroom out of the ground. You're talking about Oregon. These mushrooms grow everywhere. It's prolific. You can go outside and probably
biggest
find...
mushroom on the planet, right, is under the Oregon forest.
Is it really? Okay, I heard that it was Michigan, but I'm from Michigan, so
yeah.
I'm biased. So. But yeah, no, like how, even starting that process and saying, hey, it's going to be a felony because they're housed under these bigger topics of manufacturing or distribution. Sharing with each other is called distribution, scary, right? Manufacturing, growing a mushroom is manufacturing, scary, right? Those are still felonies. So I think even just starting off with that was this sense that this isn't really for the people. You can use it, you can possess it, but you got to get it from us. And that's not a good way to start off a bill, in my opinion. And then I think the challenge is that, as you're saying, you have to jump through so many hoops. Anytime you create an overly regulated system, now you have to pay for a license, for a tax, for a testing, for a special safe in a specific spot in a room. You have to get that approved. Now they're doing data collection on everybody. I don't know about you, but do you want someone with the camera on you while you're doing your mushroom journey and recording that and giving that on their file? It's sure you can make it anonymous, but only to what degree, right? So, in general, there's some things that are happening with that bill. The challenge is that it was pitched by Healing Advocacy Fund and some of the other folks out there as being fully sustainable. Fully sustainable meaning that the licenses will begin to pay for themselves. And before we know it, we're going to have a program that's going to be making the state money. Unfortunately, when we're talking about these things, anytime you hear the words making the state money, that's going to be problematic because they're going to try and tax you, they're going to try and overregulate you, they're going to try and find fees for everything, right? Well, unfortunately, it's not making the state money. And it costs $3.5 million a year for this program to continue on. that's going to the taxpayers now. And so that ripple effect out into the rest of the world is that you have places like Arizona, which just attempted a bill, and the bill said, okay, the way we're going to fund this is through licensure and also from fines for criminal penalties. So now something that might not have been really addressed at all in terms of arrests regarding mushrooms is now re-incentivized because that's going to fund the program. So they're re-incentivizing all of us having our own experiences or growing our own mushrooms to make sure that this more legalized, above ground, regulated / medical, clinical, I don't know what they're calling it, therapeutic, I guess is what the technical term in Oregon is, approach. So that didn't make it very far. But that's something we all have to think about, whether it's looking at the California state legislation or if we have friends in other places. The pendulum is swinging back and forth, and I don't know if this is from Oregon or from just in general on the state level. In Florida, they just passed a bill that says you now can no longer, they slipped it into an agricultural bill, that spores are now illegal. They're now the fourth state to criminalize spores, this being one of the other ones, right? So the pendulum swing on the state level is kind of swinging back in the other direction. But on the city level, counterintuitively, same thing happened the first time Trump years were going on. All the cities are like, hey, this is our opportunity to take some power back. And so actually the city is more engaged, more motivated to actually make some change happen. So if you don't live here in the Bay Area, let's talk. I have a table out there next to Aikutzi's beautiful yarn art, and we can figure out a way to sort of make some things happen and pass, especially if we can do it here in California, continue to pass those bills locally, then the state will have to be okay with having us move forward. And there's more to that, but yeah.
I could say, I'd like you to talk a little bit about, what happens when we create barriers from the people who, and those barriers are created by people who first accessed medicine through the first peoples who had the medicine and held the medicine to begin with, and just I want to know what you think about that. I know what I think about it, but I think it's more important to hear from you as someone who has a tradition of medicine holding.
Okay, well, see, there's a big thing that happens when you're born indigenous in a multicultural family and bilingual, What happens is you get the opportunity to be able to share your perspective, like my perspective. And of course here I'm not speaking for my tribe, and I would like to take the time to honor this land we're on, the Olonian and the people, because when we speak of the indigenous first peoples, well, this is land of the people, and I think we've done a lot here in the Bay Area to respect that. And with that said, I think there's a big thing that has to happen here, because part of decriminalization is opening this for local peoples and indigenous people, but that's what happens. You get cut off, right? You get cut off with all these policies, and what are these policies about? Money. Follow the money, because they're backed by money, the community's not in there, not the right people. Who's making these decisions? Why? Because they're going to be part of big pharma. So I think it's so important that we realize how damaged indigenous peoples we are, because people come and visit us and culturally appropriate our medicine and don't give us the respect. They go and claim that they're the shaman's been chosen and just really don't get it, you take a medicine and you want to go to the top right away, I'm a shaman in a week, in a month, or whatever, and that's really not the way. Or I'm going to appropriate this medicine and bring it to my people, charge for it, and then create funds through these policies. And the policy works for me because now I'm changing my name so I can serve big pharma, right? Some people we know around here, that just the misuse of the word psychedelics and plants of our movement, because choose what side are you on. Are you on the side of the medicine, the plants, and the people, or are you going to be here for the money? So with this said, I'm going to say it's so important that we give back in these hard times, to the communities, to indigenous communities, to where we borrow these medicines from, or to the people that have been the guardians of the medicine, because we don't want to be the guardians. We want to be responsible for our traditions, our life, make sure there's enough medicines for us, keep our tradition, because we don't have as much liberty as a lot of people have. like you guys, you could go and try like a peyote, visit as a visitor, and go home. Us, we have to, this is our way of life, you know, this is our life. Like, we have to go on pilgrimages, we have to go fast, we have to not have sex, we have to have abstinence. It's our way of life since we're children. Or, like for me, when I got older, like I had to learn. So I think that the thing is, support, and it's not like just by sending a ton of money or just giving money to everybody that says that supports or anything. When you see indigenous people, buy indigenous art. When you go visit, spend your money. You know, see how you can like become friends with people and build a relationship rather than I want to pay and go for a ceremony, you know? Because there's a whole different way of getting access to the medicine that takes work. It takes work. It says, hi, Larry, hi, you know, thank you for all your support, and we support each other back, and we're gonna build this relationship. Hey, you wanna sit in ceremony with me? Maybe that's the way. But we all have to start here. We all have to start, and I think one of the real important things is that because that is the reason why I love this movement, and I love that even though we're a small amount of people, it's okay, because we're the people that has to be here. You know, we're a diverse crowd, diverse people up here, and this is the people that have to hear it now, and now you're gonna step outside of here with that knowledge. So I really am grateful that you're here and that you're listening to us, but I think you should build relationships with people, support local, support your brick and mortars, support nonprofits. All of us are going through a transformation. And when you see these transformations coming here in the metropolitan world, just imagine like the indigenous people that can't feed their families, because all we're doing is not about just a local policy movement, but it's global movement. Why? Because we have to make it so we can plant our plants here, not have to travel to Mexico, not go through danger, not go through cartel lands. I can't speak for other countries and other places, but sometimes, like, you know, travel is more dangerous nowadays after COVID, and you don't know where you're going. There's a lot of things going on, but if you have access to the indigenous people that can serve your community, and you want to experience this medicine in the right way, you can start here. You don't have to go far. So when you get involved in policy and say, hey, you know, and this is so important because this is like the basis of this whole conversation, and why I'm here is because peyote is endangered. Peyote is endangered. The mining company started about, I think it's about like probably like, I want to say like, it's been a while, but like peyote is disappearing in the desert for the indigenous Wirarika people. Peyote is disappearing here in the United States. So my whole thing with Decriminalize Nature and what we've come to, if you cannot eat peyote, at least let's liberate peyote to be planted, and so it doesn't go extinct, right? And it could be here locally. And I'm trying to do this movement as a respectful way, but I'm saying here, as an indigenous person that does not speak for other indigenous people, that this is the solution, you know? We have to plant our seeds and have access to our plants, and that's not just with peyote, that's with all the plants. Thank you.
And that's a generational plant, so it's a little bit like planting a tree that you're not going to get to sit in the shade of. Plant a button that you won't be able to experience the medicine from, right?
Well, I don't think necessarily, you know, because like in my perspective, you know, peyote takes a while to like get big, right? It takes like years. It's true, it takes years. So also when you start in the traditional medicine life, and you're like a seed, you know, you get planted, and little by little, you know, you grow. But you're not gonna become this big peyote button right away, you know, it takes time. And that doesn't mean that you're not gonna get to harvest it. But you know, you might have to grow your plant one day and say, hey, you know, like, I got my little kit, or, you know, I'm gonna grow my plant. And they're like, some people just, they're like family, you know? But don't be scared to eat your peyote either, you know. You also have to say, okay, you know, we've been together, now I'm gonna ingest you. Or like for us in the desert, it's so important that we find our peyote. Why? Because that's a whole meaning to our cosmovision or tradition. And if we go and it already has been harvested to be imported to, say, the United States through the Native American church for, I'm not sure if it's just for Native American people, you know, indigenous people, then we don't have access. Or people that are just getting taken in tours, or et cetera. When I've been there in the desert, there's been people taken in tours, and I'm like, whoa, like, what is this, Disneyland? So, yeah, I think if we create access, also that allows people to build their own relationship, which is not just, it doesn't have to be the Wirarika way, it doesn't have to be your way. There is a lot of ways. Like, I listened to a lot of Terrence McKenna, and I'm like, damn, he had his way. And it was not the, like, our path, but there is a path to ingest medicine in another respectful way and learn from it, you know? Yeah.
One thing I think I've seen brought up a couple of times is maybe these state programs that are predicated on making money. The plants and the medicine is resistant to that capitalist worldview, and maybe that's why these programs are failing, is the medicine itself is powerful enough that it's taking that down. Let me see. Why don't I ask each of you something that you're working on right now that you're excited about, and then maybe we can take some questions from out there. Does that work? All right. Mason, what are you working on right now that you're excited about?
Well, what I'm working on right now is my dissertation work, and that is really going to focus on how underground providers create accountability, transparency, and self-governance in the absence of top-down government and as a political statement against top-down government. There will always be people who are knowledge keepers. There will always be people who are practicing. Even if there is a path to legality or licensure, there will still be a thriving underground. That's not going to go away. So if that is true, then how do those groups organize themselves? And it's really interesting to find out. And how do they look to other groups who have resisted the top-down politics? So this is what I am interested in and really spend my time working on. And it's really interesting to hear you talking about, because no policy can really capture the depth and breadth of indigeneity and the knowledge keepers. So some people are going to be left out in any policy. That means there's always going to be an underground. That's going to be a part of this movement, probably forever, hopefully forever.
And I think just to kind of tap in what you're saying there, that's why we focus on decriminalization, because as long as there's some way to criminalize people, the underground will always be in fear. You know, they might be able to do it and feel like they don't have to worry about it, but legalization frameworks will still create an underground, because, you know, there's some folks out there that call legalization prohibition light, right? If you pay the license fee, you pay the taxes, you pay the thing, you're okay. If you ever see any policy and then later on they say, oh, this was an illicit grower, that's not right. No one should be illicit for growing a plant or a mushroom, right? So that's why we focus on decriminalization, so this underground can thrive, can come above ground even, can share their knowledge, can share with other folks about how to do this in a good way. And, you know, it's going to be bumpy for a little bit, you know, not like the, of course, we know, of course, that guy that supposedly tried to take the plane down didn't even eat mushrooms 48 hours before, but, you know, you see those headlines that they try and scare people with, right? But it's going to be bumpy. There are going to be people that are going to have difficult experiences and challenging experiences, but the more people that feel comfortable with coming above ground, you know, you talked earlier about, in your intro, about bad actors. I think bad actors is an element of scarcity. You know, if there's only 5 people and 3 of them are bad actors, you know, people that are willing to take risk because of criminalization, of course you're going to run into the bad actors. But if you decriminalize, then it becomes this model of abundance, where there's a lot of people out there that can engage with you, that can talk to you. Then you realize, like, oh, those 3 people are bad actors. We're not even going to go over there. It's not even an issue. It's not just like, oh, those are the only 3 people I can go to. So I think by opening this up, hopefully, the bad actors will go down, because then there won't be any space for them to actually do bad work, right? So just some points on that. In terms of what I'm working on, a lot of stuff. I think one thing I'm excited about from the non-policy side is I'm putting together some workshops to help people, we see a lot of clinical research out there, medical research out there right now, and there's always these challenges, the MAPS FDA trials, and they failed in the FDA and all these other things because of issues around the double-blind placebo. Like, it's a fallacy. You can't have, there's a great cartoon, Paul Stamets gave a talk in Berkeley not too long ago, and it was like two groups of people, you might have seen this cartoon, a bunch of them are sitting on a couch, just kind of like hanging out, and the other group is like dancing naked. And so the group sitting on the couch is like, I guess we're the placebo group. So that's kind of the same thing here. It's like when you have the experience, you know that you're having this experience, right? So it's really hard, given these designs, these methodological flaws, you have expectancy issues and things like that, for it to get passed through the FDA until we sort of crack the nut of that. But that doesn't mean that there's not tons of research out there. People are doing a lot of research, and this is, on the citizen science level, right? So really putting together some workshops to help people really understand how to engage with their own research, their inner experiences, finding ways to sort of, figure out exactly what's going on. In terms of the policy work, we're continuing to make some incredible progress on the city level, which is again, like I said, pretty impressive given the pendulum swing. We are now accessing areas that we wouldn't have really expected to be accessing, like, for example, Northwest Arkansas, Alabama, Indiana, Ohio, Oklahoma. Oklahoma just had a really great psychedelic conference recently. So the conversation is shifting pretty dramatically. We're really close to getting some incredible movement in Chicago. I think we have 4 co-sponsors or 5 co-sponsors. We're just looking for our final sponsor. So if we can get Chicago to pass, and I don't know if you all know the history of the DN movement, Chicago passed for 24 hours in 2019 because somebody pressed the wrong button on the computer and said adopted, and everyone's like, oh, they passed in Chicago, this is great. And then later they're like, oh, actually it just went to the next committee. And then COVID happened and it kind of slowed that process down, but we've been engaging again with them, and every single person we've talked to has been supportive. This is the same, we talked to the San Francisco supervisors recently to kind of speak about next steps after decrim, right? And when we talked to the supervisors in 2019, they were like, oh, we have better things to do. This isn't really a priority. That didn't really come up this time around. People were like, okay, yeah, let's talk about this. Let's figure this out. Let's brainstorm. And I think Nara is going to work on some projects there as well. But it'd be great to start thinking about next steps in places that have already decriminalized. Now that we've established that sort of, essentially decriminalized, of course on the city level, it's a deprioritization and a defunding that we're working with here. But trying to give it a little more teeth there, finding ways to then protect people that are facilitating, protecting people that are bringing education to folks, trying to find other ways to do risk reduction, that type of thing. So we're going to continue chugging away with local city stuff, and as that happens, it will change things on the state level, change the conversation pretty dramatically. So I'm excited about that, yeah.
Do you find it interesting that when we talk about bad actors, and it's like, oh, we're going to stop bad actors by legalizing, like there can't be bad actors in the government? And right. I think there's a few of those right now, and it feels like maybe the good actors are the folks outside the government right now.
Right. So. And also there's a lot of critique about the power dynamic that comes with a licensed professional. Right? If you're a patient, you're the sick one, quote unquote, right? So you can't possibly report your provider because they have to know what's right. You're the sick one, you're the one that needs help, right? So it changes the power dynamic. So yeah, exactly, the bad actors are even in the licensed fields. It's not, escaping. You have, ketamine providers, I think in New Jersey, that were doing horrible things, and a variety of other folks, like being the MAPS person up in Canada was doing some things. So there's a lot of folks out there. So yeah, so obviously feel with what's in your intuition whenever you're talking to somebody that's doing facilitation. Aikutzi.
Well, I think we just got to step up and really participate and do the work, because the way the bad policies happen is, well, the people from the community don't find out. So, because we wouldn't let it happen, right? So we just got to pay more attention and we'll show up, and everybody has a life and everything, but I feel like that's really what we have to do, because, with indigenous people, one of the things that is well, we kind of have a path because, a free pass, because, well, we're respected and we can use the medicine, but everybody needs healing. So there's a couple ways of doing the medicine where well, you could use the microdoses, and you guys have done the research, and we do the healings in a different way where we know we get like good results, or like it works. And it really sucks that you're gonna have to have a license or pay or anything, because when you're on the spiritual path, you're already paying, and it's a lot. So it's a lot of responsibility. So if there's all this stuff that you have to do, well, it creates less people that really want to practice in the communities. And yeah. Huh? What am I excited about working on? Okay, well, I think that, like, actually I'm not excited. I'm very broken, Like, I'd like to take a moment to honor one of the elders in our community that shared the medicine and ceremony here in the United States. Alejandro, he was taken of his life in Yelapa, Nayarit, traveling, raising funds. One of my elders in my community, Martina, she passed away, and I was broken about it. My mom's dog passed away, and my dog passed away. So I've been very broken, but I had to commune with mushrooms, and I cried fat tears, and it healed me. It really cleansed me. It really helped me move forward. And I had to visit the mushroom plant, which is not like my traditional plant because it's peyote, but at that time I had to. And our nonprofit is doing really bad. And also I had like a meltdown about decriminalize nature because I just felt like I just had like all these commitments. So I'm excited that like I've been through this at really hard times, and I'm here showing up, and I realize that we have to change. We have to evolve what's happening with all these little brick and mortar places, things that of the way of life that we're used to. We have to use these medicines to support us, because we have like ChatGPT, and people are like thundering into another channel and like really addicted to ChatGPT, and we have to like go onto the medicine, commune with medicine and nature and be part of that, and also be able to heal ourselves in every way possible. So I had to go through this process. Right now I'm excited because I saw this horrible Amazon YouTube that talked about how Amazon broke all the small businesses and took everything online. And well, I created an eBay store. So I'm excited about creating my eBay store and not having to be the brick and mortar and be schlepping all this like art and stuff. And so sad about all the people that don't want to support us because their stores went out of business, like Scarlet Sage, Harvest House, like great little stores, community stores and shops, and like just people really affected, businesses really affected that can't support like traditional arts because they're just really struggling and having to close their doors. So I'm like really happy about that. When I had my breakdown, I actually wrote Shakruna because I wanted to be part of their last psychedelic thing, and I asked them, hey, can you support us, give me a table, can you give me a full scholarship? I was very broke. They gave me a 40% discount, and I'd rather not go. So I called here, I got a booth, I got like to speak, and I'm so filled with gratitude. So I know I'm in the right place with the right people. Thank you.
Yeah, Reggie's done amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and I've been
Yeah.
selling stuff on eBay.
Nice.
Thank you for that. Your words remind me that sometimes the work requires pause
Yes.
and exit and healing. It's a cyclical thing, right? We're not always, not all engine. Sometimes there's some breaks there, and I appreciate that you're able to take that pause, even if you maybe didn't choose it. It's choosing you for the time. And I really appreciate your words about the difference between legalization and legalization as prohibition light. I think it's really, really important to consider that having a license doesn't necessarily mean that you get to practice It doesn't mean you get to serve the people you want to or in the way that you want to. And actually, sometimes licensure leads to a narrowing of focus and really can create a lack of access. I know for midwives, it is gatekeeping, absolutely. That's the way toward gatekeeping. So we have this idea that professionalizing and licensure will make sure that there aren't bad actors and will make sure that there's a base level of skills and competencies, core competencies. But I'm here to tell you there's another way to do that. People can self-govern. They can actually create communities of accountability within their own community. My community here in Oakland is going to look very different from your community of accountability. It's going to look very different from a Shipibo community in Peru. There isn't a one-size-that-fits-all, not even in the United States. So city by city is a fantastic way to create a plurality of accountability and access.
Exactly, knowing that it's happening. What do we want to encourage? What do the cities want to encourage, and what do they want to see? So I think the thing that I'm excited about that I'm working on in this space right now is harm reduction resolution in San Francisco. We're working with Decriminalize on that and some of the psychedelic churches. And rather than talk about decriminalization, which seems to have been made a dirty word, we're talking about harm reduction. So it's what can the city do to protect churches and communities that are bringing about harm reduction, that are providing education, that are providing ethical spaces, that are holding people accountable, calling people in, and providing testing, like what Reggie and Hi-Fi Labs does, having fentanyl test strips provided for free, connecting people to services, and providing a safe place for that. So look for that coming up in the next few months. And then there are questions here.
I have a question for you.
Oh,
I have
okay.
a question for you and Larry.
One question, so real quick before we jump on that, even though decrim is a dirty word, if you ever hear that out here, just to remind people that what we're really talking about is how do we stop arresting people? That way they don't get stuck in the decrim or legalization, just how do we stop
You want a
them?
drug
Figure out
free
what
for
they-
all,
Yeah, it's just how do we stop arresting people? That's really the key there.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm curious about the framing of harm reduction
Yes.
and how you both see that. Because even the word harm in the harm reduction accentuates the idea that these medicines are harmful, and maybe more harmful, which has been the basis of prohibition, that they're more harmful than a ton of other things that are legal. We don't, even the car that you got here in, or maybe the drink you had last night.
Right.
So I'm wondering about framing this work as harm reduction, and whether or not that's maybe a double-edged sword that we want to be really conscientious about. And I wonder how you both think of that particular term and framing.
Yeah, I wouldn't say I'm thinking of harm reduction in terms of the medicine being the harm, or that the access being the harm, but that society itself and the criminalization is the harm that we're trying to seek to protect people from. And so providing spaces that are safe, that may not be associated with government or criminalization, that there are places that people can go if they're having a difficult experience, that they don't have to show up to a hospital and be afraid, right? That they can reach out to a church that'll say, okay, come in, and we have an educator you can talk to, we have a spiritual leader you can talk to, we have a therapist you can talk to, or there's these programs that we can connect you with so that you aren't brought into a system that will harm people and does harm people. So that's how I think of harm reduction.
Yeah, and I think just I love the harm is the criminalization,
Yeah.
right? So that's a pretty big one. In general, though, when we're talking about plants and mushrooms, I think we often talk about risk reduction as an approach. So everything has risk. One of our original board members, he used to always say, more people have died taking selfies. And all these substances combined, we don't criminalize selfies, right? So risk reduction, I think, is an approach that I like, because there's going to be risk. There's risk with anything, and even if you give someone all the tools, they still could have a risky experience or a difficult experience or a challenging experience. And that's one thing that I think when we talk about regulation, we need to regulate. We're going to regulate somebody into a good experience. That's never going to happen. It's too controlled. It's too tight. There needs to be that flexibility, that opportunity to have these difficult experiences, so that you don't feel like super tense and then just kind of spins you out into something more difficult and more challenging. So I think, I prefer the term risk reduction, but again, I like the harm reduction because criminalization is harmful, and that's something we need to talk
And
about.
it's something that people know and can speak about, so. All right, questions? Yes. Do you want to? I have a few. If you want to hand this off until they come out and tell us we're done, I think we can self-govern here.
Thank you. So I have a few questions, but I'll touch on my first question in relation to the vernacular around harm reduction. And I don't know if everyone's familiar with manifestation and energy and how words have like an energetic signature to them. And I guess my question is around how difficult would it be to change the vernacular so that it's not harm reduction or risk reduction or tied to a negative word? Couldn't we just change it to responsible?
Benefit enhancement,
Yeah, or,
Responsible.
safe practices.
yeah. So that's just a thought. And then my second question.
Safe access, that kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
We talked about that a lot with cannabis, right?
And just to touch on that, like changing vernacular is what we are doing as policy people,
Yeah.
right? Even for us, when we started off, everyone's like, oh, you got to use the word psychedelic because no one knows the word entheogen.
Right.
And they're like, oh, I'd much rather explain somebody the definition of entheogen than unpack 50 years of baggage. And Carl Ruck right here, he's the one who coined the term. So it's really nice to have him in the audience as well. So, so even that right there in terms of we have this opportunity, policy is creating magic. And that's why I think people are like, oh, we can't do it. And no, you can do it. You're creating the policy. Everything, if we put it in a policy, of course, we're talking within the system, right? But if you can sort of create that language right, then you sort of create a narrative around it that's different, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so I do want to call attention to, because we're all creators, no matter, like every word we speak, every thought that we have is an engagement with creation. And so how do we speak, think into existence the things that we want to see and not kind of like as a reaction? So that was the first thought. And then my second question is around what Mason was talking about, how there are contradictions in licensure, and I was looking at the CIIS program, certification program for psychedelic assisted therapy and research, and I noticed that if you're a licensed professional, you cannot provide integration. I don't know if I read that right, but I guess my question is around, so there's the question of access, and there's the question of like, set and setting and preparation, but a big part of the spiritual work is the integration, and there's coaching frameworks around integration, but how do we, self-regulate that, since it's not like a licensor type thing?
Good question. And first I will answer your first thought by saying that everybody who's here is prefiguring another world by being here. You are acting as if you are free. You are acting as if you have cognitive liberty by being here. So that is an act of politics to be in this room, to be here, to be doing the work that you're all doing. So that is, we may not be changing the vernacular specifically, but you're making change in that way. I can't speak to CIIS's program. I'm part of the UC Berkeley Psychedelic Facilitation Program. CIIS is where I'm doing my doctoral work, but I actually don't know their work very much. But at UC Berkeley, of the 60 of us in that program, everybody there is a licensed provider, just about. And most of the folks are providing some kind of integration and support services, and there has been no talk at all about the policy restricting those licensed providers from providing providing integration, preparation and integration support. In fact, some of them who have DEA licenses to protect, or just are protecting their other licenses, will only do integration and preparation and won't actually serve medicine. So as far as I know, there isn't any regulation. So what do you know about that?
Yeah, so I went to CIS as well, and when we started, you'll see a table out there, entheogenic research, integration education in 2011. They were not real happy about us doing integration circles. And the lawyers were calling, and everyone was like, hey, you guys got to do this. We need a therapist license to do this, right? But we found that everyone that wanted to do integration felt more comfortable doing it in a peer group than a therapist, because they're talking about multidimensional places and talking to beings, and they're like, the therapist has the power of diagnosis. Like, I don't want to be diagnosed with this for the rest of my life. I'm just trying to like talk about this experience, right? So we had these really great groups that kind of emerged from that around this idea of integration. And integration in general is, my dissertation I touched on, like, there's probably as many definitions as there are people doing integration, and what does that mean? I think they do. I know one of my previous partners was working there at the CIS program and doing a whole program, or at least a whole workshop on integration. So I think it's kind of embedded into that. But maybe it's because there's still that uncertainty around, can a therapist talk about illegal experiences? So again, that's where the policy thing comes into play. And even I would say for folks that aren't, our therapists are here, go talk to your boards and your insurance people and your licensing boards, because those are the people that need to change their mind. The criminalization or decriminalization won't really help. It's the board issue that comes into play. But hopefully integration becomes a big part of when we were in 2011, when we talked about integration on stages and stuff like that, Bea and other folks were just like, integration, kind of poo-pooing it, right? And now it's like you can't go anywhere without hearing about integration. So in 10 years, 15 years, it's changed quite a bit. So I imagine another 10 years, it'll just be a major part of the conversation, and therapists will be able to talk about it. But the therapists need training, not about psychological theory, but about consciousness theory. What's out there? What's possible? What types of experiences can people have? I think that's another layer of integration that needs to be spoken about. Yeah.
Thank you.
Other questions? There we go.
And thank you for running the microphone around.
Thanks for
Hi there.
making me.
Thank you guys very much for being here. Really appreciate your knowledge and willingness to share. Nara, I wanted to ask you, you had said earlier that the measures being put forth in California were getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
I wonder if you'd be willing to expand on that a little bit in light
Sure.
of kind of the Oregon, Colorado, and now New Mexico earlier this month passed their act. So.
Sure. So what I can say is that first bill that was introduced, SB 519, had a decriminalization element. It didn't say who was allowed to hold or provide medicine. It protected the medicine holder and aggregate amounts for a group setting. It acknowledged that this was happening in community. It acknowledged that these are cultural practices. And it also allowed for a potential therapeutic framework. The decriminalization element, the open access element, was taken out of that bill, and then it became this therapeutic framework. And then, but it was still, anybody was allowed to become a facilitator. The next version of the bill started off there. Anybody can become a facilitator. And then in a hearing, it became, you have to have these very specific letters behind your name to become a facilitator. And then it became, you are only able to access these services if you are in one of these 3 counties, or if you are a veteran or first responder. And then the bill this year is UC only, so it's 5 jurisdictions. Last year, the last version was only 3 jurisdictions, but it was at least under local departments of public health. And this is through UCs only. There will be 5 local jurisdictions to work with the UC, and it's a research and pilot program, again, just veterans and first responders. And I was part of a group on 519, and then beyond, that was a group of non-cis men who were saying we're not talking enough about sexual assault, about domestic violence, about postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. We're not talking about yet. And now this restricted access makes it very clear who they're trying to say is allowed to access the medicine. And so every bill is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. That's why we're starting at the grassroots again.
And what's interesting about that is, everyone's like, well, we need to get smaller and smaller and smaller because decriminalization won't work.
Yeah, it didn't
But
work.
decriminalization was the one that made it all the way to the governor's desk. So it was one person, the governor, who said no decrim. All the other committees were on board with it. And then as things got on, the second bill that had missed in the appropriations committee because of financial obligations, et cetera, et cetera. But it was like, the idea that it made it 99% of the way there through the decrim model should be something that we should try and reiterate, or at least when Newsom moves on, at least apply that again,
Right,
because
exactly.
that was, made it pretty far,
Yeah, it made it that, and that was the squished down version. But they're like, well, this can't make it through. There's no possibility, right? So we have to make it narrower and narrower and narrower, and this is the incremental approach. But there's a different way to do an incremental approach that doesn't gatekeep, that doesn't tell people who have held this medicine for 10,000 years that they aren't allowed to be part of this movement, that doesn't pull up ladders. Right? If there was a way to do this as a yes and, I think that would be fabulous. But I don't know that the folks who make the gates are willing to have all of this exist. So
There's a way to do decrim that is based on a cognitive liberty argument, that you have the right to take antidepressants to change your mind, and you have the right to take psychedelics to change your mind. You have the right to change your body and your mind.
I think there's a lawyer in Arizona right now that's trying to push the cognitive liberty argument through. I think they're at the Ninth Circuit right now. But that's a conversation that people are still hesitant on. It's okay, First Amendment for religious rights, but First Amendment for cognitive liberty, it's still hard to get that conversation through,
yeah, and that's what we're finding is what can we protect people under, and that's what we did initially in the early days of cannabis, right, was we had the protection of Prop 215 and we're able to set up co-ops and set up access models and things like that. So trying to find what models we can have for protection here, but again, in a way that doesn't stop further future broader access. And so, maybe it is our churches, because I don't think that's just not in the nature of most churches to lock people out and to say it's us only, right? It's like maybe it's us first because we're the safe place, but then we get to all say we're all a church, right? We all in our bloodlines have people who were taking nature medicines. We are all should go back and find those roots and not try to put on others' roots because we're all indigenous somewhere. We can all find our path to our own original indigenous medicines. And yeah.
Well, free the plants, why are you trying to cut Mother Earth's ovaries? And I think something that was so big also is that you've been a midwife, right? And also birthing people into this new age with these medicines that have been forgotten, with our roots. Because they're here for us, but they're gonna disappear if we don't work on it.
Nature is bigger than all of us, right? So my kid was hiking and we were talking about nature. Nature's a revolution and all of that good stuff. So.
And I think you had a question here too. Yeah.
Thanks. Hi, my name's Carrie. I'm from and I live in Modesto, about 90 minutes from here. It's the native lands of the Tuolumne Yokuts. And I am a facilitator at Psychedelic Recovery, or for Psychedelic Recovery, and I chose to be here instead of at that talk, the addiction talk, because this is really important. And after facilitating for a few years with Psychedelic Recovery, I had a want to, one, expand psychedelic recovery into more general healing, and two, to bring psychedelic community to Modesto, because there is none. And so I kind of combined the two, and I have a new in-person peer support group called Psychedelic Satsang, and we had our first in-person meeting last Sunday, so it's really exciting. And
This is the way.
Uh-huh.
This is the way.
Yeah. So this is the way of, expanding. And I also want to help decriminalize psychedelics in Modesto. So and I kind of mentioned this to Danielle, it's really intimidating because I am starting from nothing. There's nothing in Modesto. And so I'm starting the group, but I'm like, what do we do? Modesto's more conservative. It's not the most conservative area in California, but I would just like to hear some words of what do we do next?
Yeah, I think Danielle reached out and said that you were looking to receive some help, so we'd love to help support you. Keep in mind there are people all over the U.S. that are in a similar situation as you, and maybe it takes a moment or two to plant those seeds. Maybe it takes some time to just build that that vibe, that buzz, right? But people are doing it. Like I said, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Indiana, places that aren't even, they're so even far away from California in terms of even just mindset. I think California is even a little bit more progressive on this in some ways. And in some places, like even Philly, for example, which is a progressive place, is conservative on this topic, right? So it's about putting educational events together. It's about flyering and getting you're doing these integration circles or places for people to come together, and then just start pitching, and we do a monthly orientation for anyone else out here as well. Last Tuesday of the month at 3 p.m. we do an orientation on Zoom. Anyone can access it. We kind of give you the overall, here's from start to finish how you would make this happen, including building community, including ways to access, conversations with folks, how to engage with their city council, how to, write, template letters or, call them in or whatever, So let's chat more. I have a table over there and I can get your information. But for anyone out there as well, please contact us. This is something that we've trained people now, I think 29 cities, granted, I think it's about, including Colorado State, which is about half of it. We've helped about 4 million people. We're in places, are now in places that are effectively decriminalized. California is about 1.4 million. I think Washington's 1.2 million. They figured this out recently. 14% of Washingtonians, which is what you only need 5% or 10%. That social change graph. You ever seen that? Once you get 10% or 5% of something, change happens, right? Michigan is another one, and Massachusetts is another one. So places that you wouldn't expect the conversations happening. A lot of times you'll find that a city council, and I say this all the time, sometimes city council members are like, we've been waiting for somebody to ask. Thank you. You just don't know. So
Look at Oakland, right? The champion of that was Councilmember Noel Gallo, who's still sitting on the council, and he would have been one of the least likely suspects, I think, to bring forward a decrim measure, but you don't know where these plant medicines have touched people.
Yeah, we chatted with him. He's like, oh yeah, my grandmother's a curandera. I understand plant medicines, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really, you just don't know. So, but we'll give you the tools. We'll give you all the templates. We'll give you all the stuff. You don't have to recreate the wheel. It's nice to have a resolution that's already written that has been vetted by cities, attorneys' offices all over the U.S. now. So it's not like they're like, oh, this is something new. The people say, what's happened? Well, Oakland passed 6 years ago, and it's not the end of the world. So just like with cannabis, everyone's like, oh, this is going to be the end of the world if we, decriminalize or legalize cannabis, and it hasn't happened. Same thing with these substances. So love to chat with you about it. Feel strong, feel confident, and that can happen. Building that community is possible. People are all over the place waiting, so many places where people are doing this and they're just also looking for community. So putting that beacon up is a really big part of it. So
Veterans and first responders too, powerful messengers in areas that are more conservative.
And just to wrap up, this is actually a place where that cognitive liberty argument is very strong. When there's a really anti-institutional and anti-government sentiment in the community, the right to is a very powerful argument.
Yeah. Do we have maybe?
It needs to be in conjunction with the, the responsibility to as well, but it's a good start place.
We have maybe one more question.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you know?
I saw that. I think I saw the next panelist coming up on the
Okay.
stage. So
I have a real quick question. Do any of you see any hope that with this organizational anti-government feelings in Washington, that there will actually be some change out of from the health and welfare segment, and either to decriminalize, legalize, or at least change the status of different drugs?
I mean, that's a big topic, obviously. I think RFK actually has met with a team in Decriminalize Nature, Georgia before he actually went and tried to do the sort of the running for president. So he's at least familiar with the organization, but it seems like people are going towards the more clinical route. We might get it through a side effect of them cutting programs, and all of a sudden, like, oops, the DEA doesn't exist anymore. Oops, this other entity doesn't exist anymore, and that might open things up. But it doesn't seem like it seems like the focus is on fentanyl in terms of the conversation. But you have a lot of rhetoric right now. We're going to go after drug dealers. Anyone that's dealing drugs is going to get the death penalty. So that brings a lot of fear to the conversation. But it might be some byproduct of a budget cut. Okay, I'm all right with that.
so much of that's coming from a deep, deep white supremacy framework that I would be highly suspicious of anything that it put forward, because yeah. All right. Anything else? Yeah. Oh, back there.
Passing the mic.
It'll happen.
If you got a big voice, we got an auditorium here, so that might work
Yeah.
with the acoustics.
Testing. All right. First, I wanted to say your boots are amazing, and I may say that. Those are really
Thank
cool.
you.
And sorry for saying this if it's like negative at all, but I would like to ask: do you have any thoughts toward maybe like getting rid of the Controlled Substances Act? Federal legalization or federal decriminalization. You know what I mean?
Yes, that would be great. Descheduling would be, I think, the dream that all of us would like, because then you don't have to worry about all these other things about how much can you have and can you do it this way or that way or whatever else, just get rid of it. The Controlled Substances Act, at least for plants and mushrooms, is also skewed because, the DEA is the enforcement arm of the CSA, basically. It doesn't really exist outside of that. And the CSA is the arm of the pharma world, because in order for something to get off of Schedule 1, it has to be medically valuable. In order to be medically valuable, it has to be a good GMP certified synthetic, because you can't, I think 497 of 510 whole botanical trials have failed because it's too much variability. So really plants and mushrooms can never really remove themselves from the Controlled Substances Act as a plant and mushroom. It has to be a synthetic because of this process, right? So in a way, the CSA is bound to just feed the pharmaceutical companies, once they, okay, it's now got medical value, but oops, now pharma has it. Even cocoa and poppy are Schedule 2, right? Because they have some sort of pharma relationship, right? So with these plants and mushrooms, it's unfortunate that they're on there. And just in general, as you're saying, to remove it all together because of the cognitive liberty issue and a variety of other things, I'm definitely for that idea, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what I'd ideally like to see in terms of a framework everywhere would be decriminalization of every drug. If we shouldn't be criminalizing anybody for using any drug. We should be helping people who need help. And I don't believe in psychedelic exceptionalism. I do think plants are plants, and I don't love us all adulterating plants. But it's also just. I think what DSA is putting putting forward. I think is something that I would believe in, and I would like to see happen. And if we get to rebuild from the ground up from whatever's happening now.
And I'll leave you with this thought that social change often happens slowly, all at once. So just keep that in mind.
That's beautiful.
May I ask another?
Yeah. Sure.
This is just sort of a pet issue of mine, so sorry if it's off topic. It's mostly for you, I believe. Do you guys have any thoughts on sort of the carceral nature of psychology, I would call it. Any thoughts on?
So many thoughts,
There.
yes. Please come and find me. I would love to talk about the enclosure of psychedelic care by psychology. That is it's problematic, and it's something that we need to pay close attention to. And if that's in alignment with what you were thinking, I'd be happy to talk with you more about it. I think we're out of time now, but it's a really important thing to keep on our radar.
Are we out of time? I know we started late. I think.
Hello?
I think we are. Hello.
Are we out of time?
So totally self-governing here.
Yeah, we'll sit here
Right,
and
over
talk all day.
there, but I don't want to take space. We shouldn't. Yay! Here we go. So yeah, looks like we're. Last. How can people find you? If anybody here wants to find you, what's the best way?
Well, through Decriminalize, and I have a table over there too.
Excellent.
If you guys want to come and talk to us and see the art, yeah, we'll see you there.
Yeah, I'm right next to the table here. Amazing yarn art that's happening, and other weird art, and I'm decriminalizenature.org is our website. If you are on Instagram, at decriminalizenature.
And you can look up Huichol Center, Huichol, Huichol Center, and that's us, yeah.
Easiest way to find me, I'm the psychedelic midwife on Instagram.
Or Aikutzi on Instagram too.
Yes.
Yeah.
You can just probably Google me and find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Blue Sky as Not Nora, and I'm on Instagram, Sayonara Doll. So, all right.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Reggie.